So today I'm super excited to be able to share with you the experience that BTI360 recently went on to AWS reInvent back in November. And I'm going to be sharing some cool things I learned along the way. reInvent encourages developers across the world to grow each day by combining new services and technologies to solve challenging problems in interesting ways. reInvent is the gathering of the AWS community to learn about existing technologies and practices, announce new services, and bring together a lot of smart and passionate people into one city. And the one thing that I took away from this conference is when you bring a lot of those people together, a lot of great things start to happen. One of the other things that was lesser known to me before going to reInvent was exercise. As you can see here, the reInvent campus spans across the entire Vegas Strip. I think we averaged close to around 20,000 steps a day. While they did have buses to cart you back and forth, it was always kind of a crapshoot if you timed it right, so most of the time it was just easier to walk. The team that went this year pooled all of our per diem, and we all shared a suite in the Bellagio, which was super convenient because as we were jumping back and forth from one building to another, we were able to stop off at our suite and freshen up or grab some other things if we needed them. So as I mentioned, six of us were able to go this year. And while we had a lot of overlapping interests, AWS provides so many talks about a lot of different services that we still were able to cover a good breadth of different conversations, or of different topics. One of the big ticket items at AWS reInvent is the Keynote. Over the course of the week, they have 2 keynote speeches, and they cover things like lessons learned, announce new services, and have partners talk and share how they're doing cool things in the cloud and solving really challenging problems. Some of the really cool announcements I thought were worth sharing was AWS Cloud 9. Some of you might have heard of Cloud 9 before. In the past 2 years, AWS recently purchased it. Basically, it's an IDE in your browser that allows you to share your workspaces so you can pair program with other teammates. It also allows you to run Lambdas locally, which is pretty cool as well. Think Google Docs, but an IDE. The next one is AWS Fargate. As serverless infrastructure is becoming more and more important, and we're kind of migrating off of EC2 instances to use API Gateway and Lambda, the one thing that's lagged behind are containers. AWS Fargate allows you to deploy containers in a serverless infrastructure. Machine learning was also a big deal too. They announced AWS SageMaker, which allows you to build, deploy, and train machine learning algorithms and models. Natural language processing was also a big deal too. They announced Comprehend, which allows you to derive information from text. They announced Translate, which allows you to do language translation. And finally, they announced Transcribe, which allows you to do text-to-speech. For all you sports fans out there, they actually had a mock UFC fight on the stage. What was really cool about this is they were able to generate real-time character models of the fight as it was happening live. And they were able to derive really cool real-time analytics such as emotional analysis and some other cool graphs that they were able to show live as the fight was happening. And as you can see at the top left there, that one was actually the amount of force each punch they had. So you can see they came out really strong, and then they started to level out over the course of the fight. While a lot of these services are really cool, unfortunately, we don't have access to any of them right now. So one of my big takeaways from one of the keynote speeches was a talk given by Netflix about chaos engineering. And while there are technologies that allow us to apply chaos engineering, I'm not going to be going into that today. What I'm going to be talking about is some of the applying some principles onto our projects to see if we can understand where failures happen in our application and if we can handle them resiliently. So chaos engineering is the idea that we can deliberately introduce failures into our system so that we can catch them before they fail in production. So I want to walk through 2 examples of chaos engineering principles applied. So the first one is from an infrastructure perspective. As you can see here, I have an application deployed in one region, and I have my application deployed across 2 availability zones. So applying chaos engineering here would allow me to inject a failure into one availability zone to see how my application would respond. So as you can see in availability zone 1, there's some other services that aren't in availability zone 2, such as Jenkins, maybe some other DevOps tools like Artifactory or Nexus, And so the idea here is we want to be able to figure out what happens to our application when this failure happens. Well, an example from a previous project that I had, we had this very thing. While the backend and the UI were highly available because they had auto-scaling groups wrapped around them, one thing that we found was as new servers would spin up, they would actually go to Artifactory to download dependencies before the application could come up. And as you can see here, Artifactory is in availability zone 1, which is currently down. So this means as new servers were to spin up, they would fail, and I could potentially take an outage into production. So the idea behind chaos engineering here is that I'd be able to handle this failure in a test environment, make sure our application's resilient before this thing fails in production. The second one is chaos engineering principles applied to services. As you can see here, we have a typical application. A user hits your application. He hits the proxy server, which routes him to the user interface. And then we have a couple supporting microservices, such as the user service, profile, access control, search, and external dependencies. So applying some chaos engineering principles here would allow us to inject failures across one or more of these microservices. So Netflix, they actually did this exact thing. For those of you who aren't familiar with Netflix, they have a more like this microservice. And basically what they do is they say, hey, since you watched this movie, we recommend you watch some of these other movies. So what they did was they applied chaos engineering in a test environment, and what they found was they were actually providing a poor user experience when that microservice went down. So because they applied chaos engineering, they were able to make their application more resilient so that although they were degraded, users had no idea. So what they did was when more like this is down, they actually just show you something else. So while Netflix is degraded, no one really cares because we don't care as much about the recommendations. We're just looking for what we want to watch. My biggest takeaway was this. While we don't have to handle every single failure, it's good to know what the risks are across our entire application, and if there are important failures to our system, that we can handle them in a resilient way, catch them in test, so that our application is more sturdy in production. And we also have happy users and customers. The next session that I went to that I really enjoyed dealt with image and video recognition. While some of these services I'm about to talk about currently aren't available to us, our customer is becoming more increasingly interested in processing images and videos. So the speaker presented a problem. His wife would always yell at him every time he left the guest bedroom door open because his dog would get in there and just destroy the room. So instead of buying something, he decided to go to the cloud to see if it could help him solve his problem. So here's what he did. He bought a smart video camera and connected it to AWS IoT, or Internet of Things, which allows you to connect smart devices to the cloud so that they can interact with other AWS services. As motion was detected, he copied clips of that video to S3. He then grabbed still images. He then used Lambda to grab still images from that video to pass them on to AWS Recognition. Recognition is a video and image processing service that exposes some cool APIs such as object and scene detection and facial recognition and analysis. So he used the object and scene detection API to detect if there was a dog in any of these pictures. And if there was, what he did was he grabbed the video that was associated with that image, moved it to another bucket in S3, and then used SNS to send that video clip to his cell phone. So now he was able to solve the problem before his wife yelled at him. And as the saying goes, happy wife, happy life. But in all seriousness, while a lot of these services aren't available to us yet, understanding how the commercial world is solving some of these problems will give us a competitive edge on site and help us be leading engineers in our industry for image and video processing. Networking is also a huge part of AWS as well. They have multiple vendor halls in a bunch of the different hotels across the campus. And it allows us to kind of see what the community is doing to solve interesting problems using the cloud. We also get a ton of free swag. Hey, Eric, how many shirts did you get?
Probably like 20.
20, okay, cool. Another really cool thing was there's actually dedicated C2S sessions here. And what was really cool is it gives us the insight on the current process of procuring new technologies, some of the ones that are actually being announced, and some of the issues that they're trying to work through with security. Lastly, there's a Slack channel. And the Slack channel provides us a way to see how the community is responding to a lot of the cool things being announced. And as you can see here, Gordon is all over the place. He's geeking out over the Keynote from a lot of the cool services that are being announced. While there's a lot of predefined talks, one of the really nice things about reInvent is you're able to walk up to solution architects and ask questions about your current project and kind of work through some of the things that you might be struggling with. If you need a more in-depth conversation, you can actually schedule a one-on-one meeting with them. And BTI360 actually took advantage of this. Chris and Gordon actually set up a one-on-one conversation so that they could work through some of the design issues that they were currently struggling with on their current project. They also have hands-on labs. The hands-on labs are really cool because if you're interested in learning a new service, you can sign up, you walk up to a computer, and you work through a lab on that given service to learn more about it and how to use it. Certifications are also a big deal too. As you can see, if you get certified, you get a pretty sweet shirt. They also have a VIP lounge that only people can go to if you are certified. And they have cool things like retro video games, coffee, and snacks provided all day long. I was one of the only ones on the team at the time who wasn't certified, so it encouraged me to get certified on the first day so I didn't feel left out when they all went to the certification lounge. Lastly, we had a ton of fun getting to know each other and just geeking out over some of these technologies. As you can see here, Gordon and Adam are, I don't remember what you guys are doing, but we had a great time. And as I alluded to at the Christmas party, we had, there was a booth at the vendor hall that was put on by Accenture. And what was really cool about it was they created a game using AWS services. So the concept was you'd walk up to this machine that would take a picture of you, and that was your login. It used AWS recognition to know who you were so that when you came back, it would remember your last score. The game was Pong, and they had a sensor set up, and your hand moved the Pong. And then they used machine learning technologies to have the game get smarter over time as the longer you played. And as you can see here, of the 40,000 plus people that went to this conference, BTI360 got the top 5. Not only did we get the top 5, we had the highest total score in the whole conference. We beat out Accenture, who made the app. We also beat Amazon, NASA. Google didn't even make the top 5. So if you have any other questions about what reInvent's all about, please feel free to reach out to any of us who went. This year, there is a limited number of spots for people that we're sending. So if you're interested, please reach out to Gordon ASAP because he's going to be leading the trip this year. The trip this year is going to be at the end of November, so if it's something you're interested in, please send out an interest invite as soon as you can. After this talk, I'm going to be providing a link of a list of every YouTube video we could find from reInvent 2017. I think there's over like 500, so chances are if there's a service you're interested in, there's probably multiple videos that you can pull from. Thank you.